Hello and welcome back to my channel. Bonsoir et bienvenue sur ma chaîne. My name is Muriel and in this video I will be talking to you about books on drugs. In this video I will be presenting all or nearly all of the books I have on the subject of psychedelics, or more specifically psychedelic science/medicine. This is the second video of 3 I've decided to make to mark May as Mental Health/Mental Illness Awareness Month. Why, you might ask, what the hell does that have to do with mental health? Or mental illness? Well, a few decades ago, psychedelics were extensively studied for their therapeutic potentials in the area of mental illness. For depression, for anxiety, for addiction, amongst other things. But, well, a little thing called the war on drugs happened and shut all of that research down. Not saying there weren't a couple of legitimate reasons. Some people got a bit carried away with the subject, unfortunately, one of whom is Timothy Leary, if you want to look into that. But thankfully, things change for the better sometimes. And now we are going through a psychedelic renaissance. There are multiple clinical trials going on in the world researching the therapeutic potentials of substances such as MDMA, which is not technically a psychedelic, but we'll lump it in, psilocybin, iboga, and even ayahuasca, or at least, the active molecules that go into ayahuasca, which is basically DMT. And even, cannabis. Again, cannabis is not, strictly speaking, a psychedelic, but it modifies consciousness to a certain extent. So again, it goes into that general grouping of substances. So yes, several clinical trials are going on. One has just started in Germany. I very recently learned the trials going on in Israel, Spain, England, definitely the United States. If you're interested and would like to learn more, I invite you to check out the website of MAPS, which is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, the Hafter Institute, which basically assembles funding for research about psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. You could also check out Imperial College London, which is doing research, and the famed and highly respected Johns Hopkins Institute for Consciousness and Psychedelic Medicine. They're doing a lot of research into that area. So psychedelic medicine basically is kind of the new or the next frontier in psychiatric care, in psychiatric treatments. So having suffered from mental illness for most of my life now, and having had disappointing experiences with contemporary traditional mainstream psychiatry, I started reading about shit, because that's what I do, because that's what a lot of us bookworms do, let's be honest. So yeah, I started looking into this fascinating subject. Because of course I must put the disclaimer that I do not encourage anyone to do anything illegal. Don't do anything illegal, respect your country's laws, etc., etc. I'm just talking about books. There's nothing wrong with reading about shit and seeking information. Right? Okay, we'll agree. Also, quick caveat that not every single book I'm going to mention deals directly with treating mental illness as such, but they all have to do with psychedelics and psychedelics involvement in human culture, in perhaps ancient religions. I read large on that subject, but you'll definitely have books which deal directly with the treatment of mental illness, don't worry. So first, 2 memoirs, one of which I could have technically mentioned in my first video, but in any case. So first we have a classic in the subgenre, which is The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, which is one of my favorite classic dystopians, I might add. Again, a very short memoir about the author's experience undergoing a mescaline trip. Mescaline being the psychedelic substance you extract from a certain kind of cactus. So yeah, just like I said, it's basically Aldous Huxley decided to take mescaline and wrote about what happened. I mean, I can't really say much more than that. It's interesting. Psychedelic trips can get, very trippy, but very interesting. And the things that people see and experience are just fascinating. Of course, have similarities with mystical experiences a lot of the time, and just, wacky dreamlike experiences, but oftentimes are very beneficial to the person undergoing it. Doesn't mean there aren't any risks involved. Obviously, as with all substances, there are always risks involved. Check this out if you're curious. I mean, you won't really get much insight into therapeutic benefits of taking mescaline, for example. And mescaline isn't really being studied currently. I don't think it was back in the day, but one of the nasty side effects of mescaline is that it's a purgative, so it makes you puke, like ayahuasca. I mean, some people don't mind because you have people going to South America to trip on ayahuasca, but still, throwing up is just generally not something you want to do, right? But so yeah, Aldous Huxley decided it was worthwhile, and he writes about it, and it's very interesting. And then we have a memoir which directly deals with mental illness and the treatment of it via psychedelics. A Really Good Day by Ayelet Waldman. This was a brilliant memoir, absolutely brilliant. I rated it very highly. I think I gave it a 9 out of 10. This came out 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. It's fairly recent, and it's fascinating, very interesting, and it will speak to a lot of people because the author is, she's your average Joe. Like, she's not, I guess, someone on the fringe of society, someone in psychedelic subcultures, like represented by things like Burning Man and stuff like that. She's just an average mum with a very serious career, and she decided to microdose LSD. I think it's also starting to get studied at university level and clinical trials. So the idea with microdosing is to take, as the name might suggest, micro doses of the psychedelic substance, so you don't actually trip. You take very small amounts of the psychedelic substance, and it's supposed to lift mood, improve creativity, improve energy levels, act as medicine that isn't gonna make you see crazy shit or hear colors and stuff like that. And so the author suffered from some kind of mood disorder, kind of depression, but associated with the menstrual cycle, or in her case, with the cessation of her menstrual cycle. So when she hit menopause, she really started to get heavily depressed. And I don't remember how exactly, but she got wind of people microdosing LSD. She's a mother of 4. She's a lawyer. And she was like, am I going to try this? Because this shit is illegal. But yes, she did. She microdosed for a month and talks about the experience and the amazing effects it had on her mental health. But what's really good about this memoir as well is that she really goes into the science of psychedelics. She interviews a few researchers specializing in that subject. She also talks about the history of the war on drugs and of legislation surrounding drugs, and, also the deep inequalities that surround legislation and prosecution of drug-related offenses. As you're probably aware, in the United States, but also in Europe, a lot of people go to jail for selling, like, cannabis and stuff. People of color, poor people. It's not because people are actually concerned about the, perverting effects of said substances. It's just they want to make money by putting people in jail. It's very interesting for that alone, because she really tackles different angles surrounding the subject of drugs, of prohibited substances, specifically psychedelics, and even more specifically LSD in her case. I really cannot recommend this memoir highly enough. It was very interesting, very enlightening, just very hopeful, a solid base in the subject. I mean, from there you can then go read, more heavy literature on the subject, I guess, but this is a very good place to start. Then 2 books which, once again, aren't really directly concerned with mental illness and the treatment of mental illness. They're more about culture, anthropology, society, things like that. So first we have another book which is considered a classic in the literature. It's Food of the Gods by Terence McKenna. Terence McKenna, now deceased, was an ethnobotanist, I believe, and wrote this very interesting book about the history of the relationship between human beings and psychedelic plants and fungi, psychedelic substances, basically. It kind of goes off of a central thesis which you might find ridiculous and just not go along with, which is fine. You can kind of go along with just for, the thought exercise, because the author basically posits that psychedelic mushrooms specifically were an important catalyst of human evolution and human cultural evolution. It's a very bold claim. I think he presents fairly convincing arguments in favor of that theory. Doesn't mean I wholeheartedly accept it, but it's very interesting. It's excellent food for thought, and it definitely, in any case, talks about the relationship between human beings and psychedelic substances, or mind-altering substances in general. It even talks about alcohol, tobacco. So this is more like about anthropology, sociology, drug use, and human culture, things like that. And in the same vein, this is a book about a very, very specific topic. I'm a mythology freak and very interested in psychedelic science, so this really appealed to me. It's The Road to Eleusis by Gordon Wasson, Albert Hofmann, and a third author, Carla, Ruck. Albert Hofmann, if you don't know, is the discoverer of LSD, who lived to the ripe old age of 105 years old and who microdosed LSD for most of his life. So this book basically kind of tries to present a thesis about the Eleusinian mysteries. The Eleusinian mysteries were a mystic cult in ancient Greece that had to do with Demeter, Persephone, and a third deity, like maybe an avatar of Dionysus, I can't remember exactly. The theory presented by the authors is that a very important part of the ceremonies of the Eleusinian cult was taking basically a broth which included a kind of rye ergot. And basically LSD, the molecular structure of LSD is based off of rye ergot. And rye ergot is a kind of fungi. Fun fact about that, in the Middle Ages, sometimes you had bread contaminated with rye ergot and it made people nuts. And well, it killed them also. I mean, it killed them, but they hallucinated and people thought they were possessed by demons. So fun times for those poor sods. But you also get like molecules which allow for easier childbirth and things like that. But LSD was one of the molecules discovered off of that basic rye ergot. The authors of this book posit that the people at the Eleusinian Mysteries received the broth containing rye ergot and so made them have a collective mystical experience. And they comb through like mythological literature and literature from ancient Greece and various different sources. They also talk about the biochemical details of rye ergot and what it would do to your brain. I think that's like basically Albert Hofmann's part in the book. It's very specific. I mention it because it's in my collection of books about the subject. I found it very interesting, but you really need to be interested in that subject. Very quickly, won't go into much detail, but so 2 other books which just talk about their respective psychedelic substances without really delving into mental illness specifically, but there's a book about Salvia Divinorum, which is divinus sage, which is a psychedelic plant, which I've read, and not just in this book, has extremely intense and very strange effects. People see very weird shit on this plant. And then a book about magic mushrooms, which is called the Magic Mushroom Explorer. This takes a close look at psilocybin mushrooms, otherwise known as magic mushrooms, and the author's relationship with said mushrooms and all the benefits he got from experimenting with magic mushrooms. Getting to the books that really deal with the therapeutic potential of psychedelic substances. So first we have, again, a book considered a classic in the literature, The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide by Dr. James Fadiman. Dr. James Fadiman is one of the big names in psychedelic science, researched the subject back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, yeah, I think he's retired now, but he actually now gathers first-hand accounts of people microdosing psychedelics. He even has a website where you can enter your information, and he kind of gathers that and tries to make, quantitative analyses based on these first-hand accounts. And this book talks about his research, talks about the history of psychiatric, psychological research into psychedelics, so LSD, mescaline a little bit, psilocybin, and MDMA as well, though MDMA, again, is not strictly speaking a psychedelic. This is especially concerned with LSD because that's what a lot of the literature was about. Nowadays, research institutes are focusing on psilocybin. One thing, because psilocybin trips don't last as long as LSD ones, so it's a bit more practical treatment-wise, and also because it just doesn't have the same bad press LSD has gathered, undeservedly to a very large extent over the years. But this is more concerned with LSD and the research Dr. Fadiman conducted with LSD, with microdosing LSD as well. This is a must-read, basically. This book was eye-opening, fascinating, and just led me to just other books and seeking information on the internet and things like that. This is really an excellent starting point as well, along with A Really Good Day by Ayelet Waldman, and just a great reference. Then we have Psychedelic Medicine. I mean, you couldn't be clearer than that with that title, by Dr. Richard Louis Miller. It's kind of a compendium of interviews with different researchers about their research into psychedelic medicine used to treat mental illness. You have research being conducted. I mean, no, more than that. There is now a clinical trial in phase 3, or about to enter phase 3, with MDMA to treat PTSD in veterans of war, but obviously this will be applicable to other kinds of PTSD. So talks about the research being done with MDMA and PTSD, the research, I guess, still being done with LSD, with ayahuasca, like I said, with psilocybin, lots of clinical trials with psilocybin going on right now. So this is very recent. I think this was published in 2018. A great starting point, reference to then go seek information elsewhere, even more current information. And then to finish the video, one in French. I was very happy to see this book published in 2019, so even more recent than the others I mentioned. It's Phantastica by Stéphanie Chayet. I talked about this one in one of my 2020 reading wrap-ups, I'm pretty sure. Excellent book in French. Also kind of a synthesis of the research being done about psychedelic medicine, about the current trends with microdosing, with also like non-clinically guided microdosing being done in Silicon Valley, people going to South America to trip on ayahuasca. There are ethical concerns with that as well, but again, another subject for another day. And also just takes a look at the history of psychedelic research, specifically in France, because I was already familiar with a lot of the research that had been done in the Anglosphere, I'll call it. But this actually looks at the subject from a French point of view, and the author is French. And I'm very happy because I hope that doctors and researchers in France, and then by extension in Francophone Belgium, will take a look at this and go, here's potential for interesting research. We might want to get on this shit because other countries are doing so you gotta get going. This is very encouraging that now the French-speaking world is taking a closer look at the research being done in these substances and their therapeutic potentials. So yeah, if you speak French, definitely check this one out. This is very recent and reasonably up to date. That concludes this second video about awareness of mental health, mental illness, and ways of treating it. I mean, potential future ways of treating it if we're talking about psychedelics. And, speaking about the relevancy of this topic, very recently, like a couple of days ago, the BBC ran a program about clinical trials with psilocybin. I honestly invite anyone with a bit of scientific curiosity about psychiatry, about treating mental illness, to just look into it, see what it's about, if you're so inclined. And the books I mentioned are good places to start, or good places to delve more deeply into the subject. So I hope you found this video interesting. I hope it added a few books to your TBRs and just sparked your curiosity. And you don't even have to buy the books. You can go on the internet and look up scientific articles and look up the institutes I mentioned. In the meantime, I hope you will have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Take good care of yourselves. Since, it's the topic of these videos, take good care of your mental health and or mental illness. And I shall see you very soon in the next video, which will be the third video in this little trilogy on mental health / mental illness. Bye-bye.